Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of My Veterinary Life podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Dr. Marci Kirk. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm joined by our other co-host, Dr. Annie Chavent.
Hello, everyone. My pronouns are also she, her, hers.
We are so excited to have our guests today. We're going to be joined by Dr. Erin Casey. And I think I met Erin almost immediately at starting at the AVMA. Have been very lucky. I think so. But we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. Mostly your work with the AVMA. But before we jump into all of that, we do want to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you with support from our educational partner, IDEX, whose diagnostic and software solutions create clarity in the complex, constantly evolving world of veterinary medicine. And you can learn more at IDEX.com. And with that, welcome, Dr. Erin Casey.
Thank you so much. It's a privilege to be here and nice to spend our Friday afternoon together. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we love Monday and Friday recordings because they start the week off really strong, they end the week really strong, and it's just a good time all around. And we, our focus, like I said in the intro, is going to be a little bit on your volunteer work, but we would be remiss. We like to start at the beginning. So can you share with us, how you first became interested in veterinary medicine?
Oh, that's a great question. I was always the kid that was bringing home like snakes and turtles and everything, and plus dogs, cats, guinea pigs, everything. But I did not want to be a veterinarian. I thought I was going to be an ecologist and a herpetologist specializing in amphibians and reptiles. So I went that route actually with undergrad. And then got a master's degree in conservation genetics of reptiles, which is what every 21-year-old does, right? My parents thought that was a little weird. And then from there, decided to hold up for a minute and figure out what I wanted to do. And then vet school happened about 5 years later when I kind of made that next choice. Do I get a PhD or do I consider vet school? And fortunately, University of Georgia said yes on April Fool's Day. Nonetheless, I'm waiting for them to say just kidding. But so far, so good.
That is a great story. And I wonder if they thought about that when they were sending out those letters. Is this a good idea?
To this day, I still am like, one day, well played, UGA, if they come back and say it was a joke. But they let me in. So far, so good.
So far, so good. We'll keep our fingers crossed for you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Always.
And we're very happy to have you as a member of the profession. And so they must have been doing something right. You've been involved in organized veterinary medicine for a while now, but I'm curious, I don't know much about your early career stages. What did those first jobs after graduation look like? When did you start weaving in organized vet med? How did you get interested in that?
Oh, that's a great question. So I graduated in 2010, and at that time, the recession was hitting, and it was difficult to find jobs. Majority of my class did internship, probably 70 or 80% of us did the internship route because it was a job, and it was secure, and it was additional training. So I went that route and then went into private practice for a few years where in the clinic where I grew up, thought that was, the right fit, and this was going to be it. I actually walked out on day one, in tears because I realized I didn't want to do this every day. I walked out at lunchtime and I was like, I cry anyways, but definitely that hit. So I started making a plan and ended up as a AAAS fellow with the U.S. Department of State and did biosecurity during the Ebola outbreak. It was very timely that I was hired in at that office. And as that fellowship was wrapping up, I was interviewing at different places like Interpol and thinking, I was ready to continue on that route when a colleague from 10 years back sent me an email, and I was actually in Lyon, France, jet lagged. So I was wide awake at 2 a.m. And I got this email saying, hey, a job at Marielle's opening up back in Virginia. Would you consider it? And I said, sure. Why not? I'll put my name in. And then sure enough, I got really excited as I started to interview. And that's how I ended up with Boehringer Ingelheim. So that's kind of the job story. But as far as organized vet med, it was there the whole time. It goes back to kind of like that mentor, the colleague kind of tapping you on the shoulder like they did for the job I have now. But it was Heather Case and Kevin Dyka and Lynn White-Chim really did, probably 6 months into my internship, they created the Future Leaders Program with the AVMA. And that is where I got my start in organized vet med. It brought me into headquarters for the very first time ever. So I got to see Schaumburg in all of its glory and AVMA and beautiful time of the year, and meet all these amazing people I had heard about all through SAVMA, my years as a student. And that program really launched me into organized vet med, and met Marci with all the different roles that we've done, and just have stayed involved since then.
I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. We've talked about reasons to do internships, and I do think because I graduated in 2011, so I didn't do an internship, but I was thinking back like, oh, our class had a high proportion as well, and I remember now that's probably a reason. So that security is nice. So something to factor in. And that Future Leaders program was such an interesting entry level, because I think the reason we wanted to have you on too is I'm not gonna, I guess we kind of buried the lead a little bit, but spoiler alert here, you're on the AVMA Board of Directors. And I would say typically what people envision is individuals on the board of directors are typically a little bit later in their career. And that's because a lot of times that's the people that have more time and experience to bring. And so I wanted to talk about how you got your start, and it's amazing that it started with Future Leaders, and it was a place sort of like we preach a lot on this about Power of 10 at the state level.
Yes.
And so anything you can do to open up spots for people just starting their career is really obviously very impactful. So I just wanted to highlight that, to have people make sure they're checking out those opportunities, because most organizations want individuals who are early in their career to start and get a feel for it. That's a lower commitment, right? Power of 10 is usually a year. Future Leaders was a year. I'm not saying there's not work involved with those programs, but just a little bit of a lower commitment. Because when you start getting up into some of the other ones, board of directors, for example, that's a little bit of a bigger commitment, which is why it sort of self-selects for some people that might have more flexibility in their career. So I guess I really do want to know, and you can take us back as far as we need to go, but how did the road to board of directors at AVMA, like, how did that shape up for you?
What did that look like? Yeah, and I met with Future Leaders. I was so lucky. I was one of 10 people, just for context in the program, one of 10 people across the country that were selected to be part of this cohort. And we were given, basically brought together and said, what would you like to do? What's something you want to create for the profession and moving forward? And so we had a chance to really bond and work together. And many of us are still in touch to this day. We're very close. And majority of us are still involved with veterinary medicine. So it was a fantastic program to kind of hook people in their first year out. And it's been great. I just had to smile because I just today was talking to one of my cohorts, Dr. Chris Gargamelli. So we definitely have stayed in touch, and all of us have pretty much stayed involved. But that was very much the start. And then from there, I became involved with different committees and committees only, then House of Delegates. But I did not have the board on my radar. I didn't have House of Delegates on my radar. I just know what I enjoyed. I knew I enjoyed our profession, and I wanted to support it. But just getting involved with the as the Veterinary Leadership Conference Planning Committee as my next committee really opened my eyes to all the different things we could do in our profession. But I didn't have major leadership aspirations, or didn't even think, why me? That's not my thing. I wouldn't be good at that. But when people just encourage you and tap you on the shoulder and be like, hey, you would be, why don't you come to House of Delegates meeting? That's how that position worked out. I was subbing for somebody who couldn't make it because he had ankle surgery. So they're like, hey, you want to go? I'm like, oh yeah, it sounds like good. I love convention. Let's go. And then I got to see how things really worked. And then halfway through the meeting, I was sitting next to the alternate delegate who was serving as a delegate. I'm like, you know what, Bill, this is so much fun. And he looked at me, he's like, you know what? I'm really overtaxed. Would you want to take my seat? It's like, all right, let's do this. So that's how that worked. So a lot of it was just asking the questions, being in the right place at the right time. And for the board position, I started talking to Dr. Michael Bailey a couple years prior, because I saw what he did and kind of had that feeling of like, I want to see if I can be like him. He's a strong leader, is involved with the profession. People respect him. And I wanted to see if I could follow in his footsteps. And he was very encouraging and supportive along the way. So it worked out. So far, no one ran against me, but I'm here. It worked out well. I won against myself. But it's been a good position to get involved. But I do want to encourage folks not to be intimidated by the roles or the positions, or think you have to be retired. I'm probably one of the youngest people on the board. I think Amanda might be younger than me, Dr. Beasel. We don't really talk ages, but I am definitely one of the younger board members. And it's nice to have I feel it's nice to have our perspective on the board.
That's so helpful to hear some of that background, because like Marci said, I feel like there is sometimes this just gap in the story of what were the steps that led to this leadership position and how did you get there? And of course, everybody's story is going to be a little bit different. And I love how yours involved people along the way, as a lot of them will. But I think you bring up a good point of sometimes it takes somebody else looking at you from the outside to readily identify strengths that you might not even know that you have. And it seems like you had a couple of those really strong mentors along the way to encourage you and notice some of those things and kind of foster and nurture them to where you are today. So I think that's really helpful just to know that there's no one path to get to the board of directors or to get to any leadership position. It's kind of following what you're passionate about and meeting the opportunities along the way. And I'm curious, now that you're here and kind of you've got a little bit of the job under your belt, is there anything that's surprised you so far now that you're actually in the position?
I will back up and say that we mentioned the mentoring and people tapping you on the shoulder, and that imposter syndrome is real, because I know almost all of us know this. Imposter syndrome is the feeling that you're not quite where you should be, or that April 1st letter I got from UGA really was a joke and they didn't really want me. Was I smart enough to actually graduate vet school? I have that all the time. So a lot of the leadership positions, it does take someone else from the outside looking in, saying you actually are, you are actually good at something. You are good at being a leader and you can do this. So that helps. And listen to those people, because oftentimes we are not our best cheerleaders. So listen to folks who are, because they have your best interest in mind and that of the profession, and they want you involved. So I'm happy to tap anyone on the shoulder. So just give me the names and I'm coming after you and we'll get you involved. As far as surprises on the board, I'm trying to think what surprises. I'm surprised, I guess, every day by how much I'm still honored to be on the position. And maybe that sounds silly, but it's so cool to represent our profession, and just seeing how happy people are that I'm willing to, reach out and talk with them and find out information for them and do whatever I can. I really have enjoyed that part of it. It's just such a privilege to, and it sounds cliche, but I really don't mean it that way, but just to help and see what we can do if people are interested in, the new vet schools coming up and how to connect folks and get seats on the board or seats in the different schools. So really, I think that's a lot of it, just how much good we can have at the individual level, as well as representing the profession at the national level.
Yeah, and perhaps that's something that we should talk about. I'd love to know, what your roles and responsibilities are as a board member, but people may not, because people may not understand how the structure sort of works and what the House delegates versus board of directors. So what you all are responsible for, and that it is elected by members that you would be representing, and you are accessible to those members you're supposed to be representing them, you and everyone on the board, their constituents. So can you just sort of walk us through like what you all are supposed to be doing?
Absolutely. To me, I see it as I represent 6 states, and I always have to pause because I usually get them right. But yeah, it's Virginia, Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, DC. Oh, goodness gracious, New Jersey, I mentioned. Yeah. So
Maryland, whoop, whoop.
Maryland, of course. I get nervous. Yeah. So 6 states I know I represent. Perfect.
I got you. A constituent here, so I'm allowed to chime in.
I love you. Don't worry. Yes. So for me, it's representing their interests. I've had concerns from the vet school being worried about a vet school being worried about the number of residents passing their exams. How can we help with that? Because we need more specialists. What about staffing at the vet schools and faculty? Addressing questions that, a student got into this school and this school. This one's not accredited. This one only has a letter of reassurance or assurance. This one is accredited. It's good to go, but it's expensive. Where do we go? What do you recommend? So I can answer those questions and also bring their concerns up to the board and then higher levels, just so they're heard. Doesn't mean we can always fix everything and do everything, but this way we can at least hear what's being said, and discuss it and see if any changes need to be made. So that's how I see it. I'm sure there's more of a formal definition, and just, Dr. Dyke is very good about giving kind of the layout of things, but that's how I see it.
That's great. And I feel like having those specific examples of questions or concerns is really useful to provide some color to the position, because it can seem like very like rigid and formal, like the House of Delegates and the Board of Directors. But really, it's just an organized kind of systematic way to have two-way communication is what it sounds like from your description. And I kind of laugh a little because that's something that I have had to learn throughout my career, because I remember like when I was young, I always thought like, how is it so difficult to figure out what everybody else is thinking? Like they'll just tell you, right? Like,
Yeah.
what are we doing here? Why are there all these layers and it's making this way too complicated? But it's not that simple. And especially as we get into the complexities of the different kind of specialty areas of our profession, and geographically, there's some unique challenges there. And we really do need to be structured about a representation to make sure that these voices are getting heard. And it's not just the loudest voice or the person who's there, right? It's got to be as representative as possible. And so it is a really, really key position, but I like that you're able to bring the sort of humanity of the position as well, and that you really are trying to just to represent the people. So it's really cool.
I'm doing my best, and I try and make it approachable. Like, sometimes I get distracted on emails, but I do my best to like stay focused and respond to people and do what I can to help, because that's how I see it. I'm serving the people in the 6 states. One person once described to me kind of the leadership pyramid isn't actually like this with the person at top. It's actually flipped, which I can't do in my hands. I'm not that flexible, but think of it like this way, maybe, where you're serving the people that work for you, basically, is how I think of it. So, I work with a team of 7, 8, actually 9 now sales reps. I see myself as working for them. What can I do to help them and make their jobs and lives easier so they can be successful in their careers? And that's how I think about this position too. What can I do to represent my 6 states, including Maryland, to make sure that they support them and that they're represented with the issues too, with the legislation coming through, make sure we can get connected with lobbyists in DC if we need to. So it's been fun. And so far, 6 months in, 8, 9 months in, I'm doing okay so far, I think.
You're doing more than okay. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I will bring up the point too. One other thing that I would like to see some change on is that there's a lot of formality associated with the House of Delegates and with the board, and like dress codes. And I would never want that to be a limiting factor, like having a suit or having fancy business clothes. I want to make things just a little bit more accessible to folks, because that's important to me. It doesn't have to be quite at the level maybe it always has been. It would be nice to change it up a little bit to make it more comfortable for other people, everybody, to want to participate. But that's just kind of a side note I'm working on slowly.
I love it. And I think that's a really great point to bring to front of mind of how can we be more inclusive in these conversations when your role is to bring voices. How can we make everybody feel comfortable? So that's thank you for bringing that up. And so as another part of your role and sort of dovetailing with that ultimate mission is you get sent all over the place. There's a lot of travel involved with the board of directors as well. And we are actually fresh off of AVMA Symposium where you're able to attend. But I think that's another component that was a little bit of a surprise of like how frequently you travel into the various places. And that can be something really attractive about the position as well. So I would love if you could speak a little bit about the travel requirement for the board. And since we are fresh off Symposium, give us a little debrief of your time there and your experience in Knoxville.
Absolutely. So I'll start with, I'd say, House of Delegates. That position doesn't require as much travel. That was twice a year, basically, for Veterinary Leadership Conference in Chicago every January. And then wherever convention is held during the summer months, usually June, July, August timeframe, usually in a fun new city. I mean, Austin in June, we're going to rock it. It's going to be fun, nice, sweaty, but we'll have a good time. I promise. So that's the idea for, House of Delegates travel. For board of directors, it definitely is a step higher as far as travel. We have in-person meetings. Generally, we're back to mostly in-person post-pandemic. And those are every other month or so. We have a board retreat, and those are usually in Schaumburg at headquarters, Schaumburg, Illinois. And then we have a board retreat in the fall. This year it's just in DC. So that's not hard for me being Virginia based, quick train ride. And then occasionally other opportunities like the legislative fly-in DC recently in February, which was super fun and very educational. And I encourage everybody to consider going to that next year. And then SAVMA, for example, was this past weekend. And it was, it's funny. I always forget how much I enjoy the students. And it sounds silly to say, but they're so much fun and so excited. And they are our profession. It's not the future. I mean, that is our profession. And they are wonderful. So I just enjoyed speaking with the individuals. I especially tend to connect with the second career students. So I had a chance to speak with a few of them, Texas A&M and Midwestern, I think was one of the schools. So shout out to them. It was a very fun weekend and educational for me. I did have to fly back a little bit early for a wedding, actually for the delegate in Virginia, the person who took my seat when I stepped down, she got married on that Saturday. So I flew home early to see that. But that's just an example of the friendships that form in these positions too.
Well, I love how you showcase that you can balance it,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's really important because especially if we're encouraging people at different stages of your career, there are different obligations that you have. And you can still make it work and shift through your priorities as needed. And I'll just put a plug in 2026, if anybody wants to run for House of Delegates or anything, conventions in Anaheim. And you know what's right across the street from the convention center, right? Right? Disneyland.
Will you be running a race that weekend, Marci?
Oh man, I will be running wild the whole weekend, I'm sure. So
Okay.
in Austin, I'll be running a little slower.
All right.
The heat and everything.
Austin will be a little slower because of the heat, but
Yeah.
Anaheim will be fun. And
It'll
I
be
do
great.
like that. Let's get people out there. Anaheim is 2026.
Yeah, 2026. You have
Okay.
time, right? Like I'm planting the seed. I mean, the year after it's in in 2025, it's in DC, which is
Okay.
also great. But in case you need some more time to percolate on this, 2026.
Way to put it together, just get people interested. I like it.
Yeah. I have no idea where it's at after that. My sights have been on 2026 for quite some time now.
I think I know, but I forget. So yes, I'll be there. I know
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
So, just as we sort of look at wrapping up here, I feel like you've sort of hit on this, but I want to like put a fine point on it. If you had some advice for our listeners at any stage that they want to get involved at any level, like if you're a student and you want to get involved in an organization, or a pre-vet student and you want to get involved in some leadership roles, or organize veterinary medicine or learn more, like what would you sort of, like, we danced around it, I feel like, but what would you say is your advice that you would give them?
I would think of two things. One, ask the people where you like what they're doing and like the work that they're doing. Ask how they got there and how you can get involved. Renee Carlson was a huge mentor for me. We lost her probably 5-6 years ago, unfortunately. An amazing veterinarian, one of the first female presidents we had of our organization. And I still have emails saved from her. Actually just reread one the other day and connected with her husband over it. Ask and just see how people would recommend you getting involved, and listen to them. Because again, you're not going to necessarily be your own cheerleader, but other people will. And also be that person for other people. So even our new grads, they bring so much to the table, and they can mentor folks and encourage other people to get involved. So you can be that person for somebody else, but also have someone encourage you. So think of it both ways. It's a two-way street. So that I think would be kind of the advice I would like to share.
That's an excellent piece of advice, a two-part piece of advice. I love two-part questions here on the podcast. So I also love two-part pieces of advice because I think it also speaks to your point earlier of maybe not seeing the strengths in yourself. You might not immediately think of yourself as a mentor or somebody who has advice to give, but everybody does based on their experiences. And so being willing to take that step and kind of bravely put yourself out there as somebody who can offer advice is such a great flip side of that coin of being brave to ask and also being brave to reach out and help lift somebody else up as well. So thank you so much for putting the fine point on that piece of advice, because it is really a great one to internalize and keep with us.
It is. I learned so much from the students this past weekend, just talking with them about their interests and all the cool things they want to do and how they're going to do it. And like they're interested in hackathons and bringing that back so they can just explore and partner with like the engineering school and the med school. And like, I love this. I learned so much from talking to them. So it doesn't matter where you are in your career. It's still a partnership, and mentorship goes both ways.
For sure. For sure. Well, Erin, Dr. Casey, thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us, podcasting and percolating on the profession. We've really enjoyed our time with you today.
You guys are fabulous. Thank you so much for your time. It was an honor to hang out with y'all.
And thank you so much to each of you for joining us on My Veterinary Life podcast. We love hearing from you, so please be sure to leave us a ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you listen to. And you can also email us at mvlpodcast@avma.org. Take care, ask, and offer advice, and we will see you next time.